Martin, it's really, really nice to meet you. And then thank you so much for your time. And I was really looking forward to speaking to you. And I have a set of questions that Junpei shared earlier. And I want to start by some warm-up questions. And I want to know a little bit about you. Before joining AEPW, what did you do? And then the role within the AEPW, what are you focusing on?
Very good, Tashi-san. So firstly, very nice to meet you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk here today. Yes, I come from a almost 40-year experience in the industry. So I started with Shell in 1980 and went through a series of roles in manufacturing, in commercial and business management, in R&D, M&A. I've done many different things during my time. Just prior to joining the Alliance, I was the Chief Executive Officer for a joint venture with PTT Global Chemical and LyondellBasell as my parent company in Thailand. I spent 3 years there. Prior to then, I was running the polyolefins business for LyondellBasell in Europe. So I've done many different things. I really came to the point in my career after 40 years where I was thinking, what do I want to do next? Do I want to do more of the same sort of thing? And I saw this opportunity with the increasing pressure on plastic waste to think about doing something quite different, maybe giving a little bit back after all those years of experience, recognizing that plastics really contribute hugely to society today. Also to giving a low footprint in terms of environmental impact, but very much not understood and very much recognizing that there are significant environmental challenges for plastic after usage. So I took the opportunity to step out from industry to come and join the Alliance to end plastic waste. And I think what I love about this role and this challenge is that it has every dimension of complexity that you can imagine, from economic challenges, technical challenges, political challenges, social challenges. Solving the issue of plastic waste is really a key issue for society as a whole, I believe. And I wanted that opportunity, and here I have it in the Alliance to End Plastic Waste.
Great. Wow. You are bringing a lot of rich experience from the industry, but also the managerial experience to the Alliance. That's fantastic. So what is your role specifically within AEPW?
Yeah, so I am the Chief Advisor for Technical Solutions, which kind of makes me like the Chief Scientist or the Chief Technical Officer. So what we do in my team is that we're looking to develop the technical solutions and the solution pathways which will help us to address plastic waste. So specifically, we take the strategy of the Alliance, we take the strategy of how do you approach ending plastic waste, and we convert that into projects and activities that we can do. So the Alliance is very focused on doing projects. We like to call ourselves a do tank rather than a think tank. That doesn't mean we don't think. Of course we think, we have strategy, we have direction, but what differentiates ourselves from many other organizations is that we're really set up to operate large scale projects. And so what my team is doing is looking at areas of intervention, identifying the type of projects that we want to do in those areas, sourcing, developing the projects, bringing them up to the point of budget approval. And then for certain types of projects, in particular, the really large game-changing projects, my team will execute those projects as well. So see them through to completion, learn the lessons from them, because for sure not everything works exactly as you expect it to. But we learn the lessons from those, and then we can feed those back into developing new and improved solutions for the future.
Great. So if you are sort of a chief scientist type of person within the Alliance, I believe you have seen and you have reviewed quite a number of projects that comes to AEPW, or I'm guessing sometimes you kind of try to headhunt or identify something that they may not be applying, but the Alliance kind of find it interesting, some of those projects. How did the Holy Grail come to your attention within the Alliance?
Yeah, exactly as you say. We have, firstly, we received many proposals. Quite honestly, overwhelming number of interest, ranging from very small scale projects that you could see people have a good idea, they believe that they have the opportunity to be able to do something good, and really looking for funding for quite small activities, through to really large scale game-changing industry solutions. The first category can be quite challenging for us because we get many ideas coming from all sorts of different channels. They take a lot of evaluation and understanding, is this an idea that we think can work? We always try and feedback or give feedback to project proponents to encourage them. If we can't fund it, at least we can help them perhaps make a better project. But Holy Grail came to us actually through our member companies. So because the Holy Grail project is a project which was founded by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and with industry, then very well known in industry. I guess the name Holy Grail already gives you a clue in that respect. And so that project came to us through our industry partners, through our member companies, in particular through Procter & Gamble and Pepsi Cola. So that's the idea came to us for funding in first quarter of last year.
Right. So from the Alliance perspective, or your perspective as a chief scientist person, so you have the technological innovations that the Alliance is most interested in, and how does this sorting technology of Holy Grail seen? How important is it to the Alliance?
I think Toshi-san, the clue again is in the name. The fact the industry called this the Holy Grail project. Perhaps it's a little bit of an arrogant name to say that this can change the whole world of recycling in particular. But for sure, the opportunity to be able to improve the quality of feedstock for any recycling operation is critical to the ability to be able to produce high quality recycled materials. And we see this everywhere. So particularly for mechanical recycling, then what the feedstock that you put in gives you the quality out. And if you put in high quality feedstock, you can get high quality recyclers out. But finding those high quality feedstocks is very challenging. So what the industry does today is a lot of recycling of post-commercial materials. So post-commercial would be, for example, material that is used to deliver from the factory to a warehouse, the warehouse to the retail store, perhaps the plastic waste which is handled by the retail store itself. But once the plastic goes from the retail store to the consumer, to the household, it starts to get very challenging to be able to sort a high quality feedstock from it. So one approach that is becoming increasingly popular, including also in Japan, is the use of deposit return schemes to encourage people to return individual materials like a PET bottle, a plastic bottle, for example, and using reverse vending machines to be able to collect those materials. So in that case, you do receive a very individual, highly sorted, usually very clean feedstock back, which is good for recycling. But the majority of what comes back from the household is mixed plastic, contaminated plastic, difficult to do anything with. And what the Holy Grail technology allows us to do is to be able to take that very large volume stream of household waste and start to sort that into much more accurately defined plastics, which we can then mechanically recycle, and we can produce much higher quality recyclers from that.
Great. So you mentioned that you were in Thailand previously, and I am now based in Indonesia. I've been here for the last couple of years or so, and seeing a lot of more plastic waste as more visible challenges, and I think in the different parts of the world, it's not that visible. But I think if we go to Southeast Asia or African countries, you see them every day as lying on the streets, on the beach, etc. And how do you see potential applicability of this technology in those contexts where the collection from household itself is still, I guess, at the very early stage?
I think very good question. Indeed, you see different parts of the world at different stages of maturity along the journey. And the way that we see Holy Grail currently, it is a largely European project. I think the next step with the Holy Grail project will be to translate it to other countries which already have very mature collection systems in place. And remembering that collection is not just about plastic waste, it's about all of the wastes from a household. So metal, glass, paper, cardboard, organics, they all need to be collected and managed appropriately. And in many of the Western countries, for example, the more sophisticated economies like Japan, like Singapore, increasingly China also, the waste is already collected. But after it's collected, a large amount of it is going to incineration or it's going to landfill, and so you're not recovering the economic value, nor are you mitigating the environmental consequences. So for these areas with mature collection, then it's very clear something like Holy Grail can help us to sort that material, extract the value from it, recycle it, and move into a much more circular economy. For the areas that you mentioned, and totally correct, the reason the Alliance to End Plastic Waste is headquartered in Singapore is because we recognize not Singapore itself, but Southeast Asia is one of the big challenges in the world, along with Africa, to a lesser degree, South America, India. But these are the regions where there is not an already mature waste management system. So our focus as the Alliance there is firstly collect. If we're not collecting material, we can't do anything with recycling. So the way I would see the Holy Grail technology, for sure, it's too early to bring it into a country like Indonesia, where we haven't got the basic waste management under control yet. But as soon as we can start to see, okay, now we're putting in basic waste management, we're putting in simple recycling systems. It's good because it takes many years to develop this type of infrastructure. We can start to design the sorting and the recycling infrastructure with something like the Holy Grail technology in mind. So where you see the Western world is going through an incremental journey of one technology and then developing to the next technology, and from there, I think what we can do is help the developing countries to be able to leapfrog that. It's a little bit like the example of, do you have copper connected cell phones in Africa or standard phones in Africa, or do you jump straight to 3G, 4G, 5G? Can you leapfrog technology development? And I think with having a clear vision of what a future state will look like, we can more efficiently take a country from its current state to that future state.
Yeah, great. I think I love the analogies with mobile industries development and the leapfrogging, and hopefully that will also happen in the plastic industry. So I'm curious, this was not in the original question list, but speaking with you, I got interested in whether there are equally interesting sorting technologies that the Alliance is currently reviewing or discussing. If there's anything you could share about that.
Yeah, for sure, Tashi-san. Then there are multiple different advanced sorting technologies, and perhaps I should correct the word sorting here to talk about detection, because what we're discussing with the Holy Grail, which is working on the concept of looking at an invisible digital watermark that can be read. That digital watermark is a detection technology. It's able to identify an object and say, that's exactly what it is. Then from a database, we can then look up, we can get all of the information about that particular product. There are other advanced detection technologies as well. So one which is extremely interesting, and the Alliance is also looking at very closely, is in artificial intelligence enabled object recognition. So with a digital watermark, the brand owner or the converter that produces the product has to put the digital watermark onto the article. In the case of object recognition, then the recycler or the sorter needs to teach their equipment to recognize an object. And to recognize the object, you need to be able to see it from different angles, from different perspectives. Maybe it's contaminated, maybe it's crushed or squashed. So the artificial intelligence is learning to recognize the object in whatever orientation it's in. That's an extremely interesting technology, and it has the advantage over Holy Grail that the brand owners do not need to do anything at all. They simply provide their product, and then the recyclers can recognize this is a plastic bottle, for example, and high-density polyethylene shampoo bottle. They know exactly what to do with it as a result. There are many other technologies as well. One most established in the industry today is near-infrared detection, which tells you the type of plastic. And there are emerging technologies which maybe are too soon yet for the maturity of the industry, but emerging technologies using markers, optical markers, isotopic markers, which would enable you to really trace the product, not only through its phase from production, use, and then into recycling, but after recycling as well, so you can really follow the journey and the life cycle of a product. But today, artificial intelligence object recognition is probably the nearest contender to Holy Grail. I think the way I would look on that is Holy Grail, so digital watermark, is really a technology platform. So it's something that we can use very clearly for sorting. We can identify the object, we can sort it, and we can recycle it. But we can also use it for many other things as well. So for example, it can be used in the store by consumers, read with an iPhone to be able to get additional information. It can be read in the household to be receiving direction on how do I recycle this material. We can bring many other elements of in-store information. So for consumers, it can be very valuable. But I think what I really like about the digital watermark is that it can also be used for example, deposit return schemes are more and more moving towards saying we don't just want to have a deposit on the particular type of article, but on the specific article itself. It's called serialization. Every bottle will have a number, and that number will enable the industry to be able to trace where was that product put onto the market, and where was it received back from the market. So the advantage of digital watermarks is that you can serialize, so you can really label not just a specific article, but the number of that article itself. We can also use it, for example, for informing extended producer responsibility schemes. How much product was put onto the market? Where did it appear back? We can compare country by country, region by region, brand by brand. So it enables a huge amount of big data. And as is often the case with disruptive technologies, big data, hard to predict just how that will get used. But digital watermarks will give us a platform that will enable all of this data that I'm absolutely sure the industry will find some really creative ways of using that.
Wow. Thank you for that perspective. I think a lot of companies in Japan will find it extremely useful. You mentioned the AI, usage of AI on the detection and the markers you mentioned, and serialization. Those kind of key perspective within the detection is, I think, something that a lot of R&D teams in the audience will find extremely insightful. So thank you so much. In this context, I want to switch gear to talk about the implications for the Japanese audience. And I think as the really high level of participation indicates, there are a lot of companies and the leadership within the companies are really interested in pursuing the similar missions as the Alliance. And they are showcasing some of the interesting innovations within the companies. But by kind of you have seen a much wider pool of innovations and some interesting progress in this field. What are the advice that you might have for the Japanese companies to do more?
I think really interesting question. So the first thing that I would say is that we need to find solutions quickly. So Japan, obviously very technically capable, very innovative. I would like to see innovations coming to market, so coming into deployment as quickly as possible, and not necessarily waiting for the perfect solution, but finding a good enough solution moving forward. Because as always the case with new innovation, you tend to iterate your way to the best solution. You don't immediately know between 2 or 3 different choices. So if we talk digital watermarks, object recognition, optical markers, for example, which is the best technology going to be? In 15, 20 years' time, we'll know the answer to that. Today we don't. So let's go ahead and just start implementing, getting things out there. I think the Japanese market for me is really in a very good position to be able to move forward, because you have control of the basic waste, you have collection systems in place, you have end-of-life management in terms of mostly waste to energy, so incineration, to ensure that the plastic waste is being properly managed. Now there is a huge opportunity to be able to work on the additional value capture from those waste streams, and in particular that is recycling. It's also the reduce and reuse, and my encouragement always to people is to think about your plastic life cycle from a very different perspective. That if it really is single use, if it's something which we are not able to recycle, you look at that and think, I can find a better solution for it. So a lot of opportunity for creativity, a lot of opportunity to bring in new technology. I would only encourage to move quickly, because you can. And if we take the example of digital watermarks or AI object recognition, those technologies are already mature enough to start to deploy. But the point is, to deploy the technology is not enough. You have to learn to put all the downstream infrastructure in to use it. So detecting is one thing, using is another thing. And there is a huge investment which is required, and actually a significant investment and business opportunity in all of that downstream infrastructure to be able to make use of the advanced technology in the upstream and then the value capture in the downstream.
Great, that's really great. So the participants of these webinars are mostly companies, but there are government and then also the university academic participants. So what are the messages that you might have for these non-company participants in order to have really industry-wide or maybe the cross-industry collaboration to have a much bigger impact?
Indeed. So let's take the academic institutions first, if I may, then. Huge opportunity for technology innovation, for redesigning some of the products that we use, for being able to find more circular solutions. And in particular, circularity I like as a theme for plastic waste, because not only are we recovering economic value, environmental value, we are having a very significant impact on reducing the carbon footprint as well. So I think there is huge opportunity in the academic world to be able to explore many different solutions. But in particular, addressing something which is also very relevant for governments is that the economics of waste management are quite challenging. And what do I mean by that is collection really has to be thought of, in my opinion, as a community service. So it is a service to the community that your waste is collected and is being properly managed, and that needs to be paid for. But what we're looking for is that the downstream activities that industry can operate are generating as much value as they can from waste management in order to be able to pay for or to reduce the cost of collection. And that's relevant in Japan, it's relevant in the US, in Europe, etc. But it's also very relevant in those countries that struggle more to be able to afford the cost of collection. So anything that we can do that is showing innovative ways to be able to capture value from plastic waste is extremely powerful. Now, for governments, I think it is still an acknowledgement that the system needs some economic interventions in order to make it work, at least to start the whole activity going. So when you're often faced with a chicken and egg, the economics don't work, so nobody invests in it. But the fact that nobody invests in it means the scale's too small, and so the economics don't work. And so you need to start working on, how do I make something happen here on a larger scale? That often requires economic interventions, and there are different forms of economic intervention. But for example, extended producer responsibility, very powerful tool, very well used in a number of different countries now. But the beauty of extended producer responsibility is it's a concept as much as a economic intervention. And why do I say concept? Is because it places the responsibility on the upstream industry, which is designing and developing plastic packaging, for example, plastic articles, to think about what happens post-use. So in a linear economy, the upstream industry optimizes everything in terms of performance to the point of use. But once the product has been sold, delivered to the consumer, that's it, the upstream industry has finished. And then the downstream industry, the waste management industry, has to deal with the waste which is generated. Extended producer responsibility creates a linkage across the upstream and downstream industry and forces, or at least encourages, strongly encourages optimization, that when you're designing a product, you're already thinking about how we're going to deal with that. And that brings new novel ways of being able to design and to be able to treat post usage. So I think that's a powerful tool, but it's one that requires strong support and encouragement, if not even regulation, from governments in order to encourage that type of optimization across the industry.
Great. Well, thank you so much for very practical and thoughtful message to the different parts of the audience in Japan. So I have gone through all the questions that I wanted to ask, but before we close, is there anything else that you want to convey to the audience of this webinar?
So I think to convey again that technology is part of the answer, but also I would say that a significant component always of waste management, and in particular care for the environment, is coming down to the individual consumer behaviors. So I think, why are we where we are today with waste not managed as effectively as it should be? I think you can't point the finger at governments or society or industry in isolation. It's really the combination of everything. And for many years, we've been driving towards consumer convenience. So everything looking to become more convenient, quicker, easier, faster, cheaper. And that's happened without necessarily paying attention to the environmental consequences of those convenience models. So what we're needing to do now is, in a way, maybe dial backwards a bit. Maybe you could also say it's moving forwards, but to make sure that environmental consequence is part of everybody's thinking, and a little bit of trade-off of the convenience against the environmental impact is increasingly important. And I think that's a message for all of us who care for the future of the planet, for the next generations, is where you could see that society is taking more attention of the environmental consequences of the choices we make. And if we can just do something, not a wholesale change, but we're just 10% more careful, that can have a dramatic impact. So that's the message I would like to leave you with, Tashi-san.
Great. Thank you so much, Martyn. Really nice talking to you. And as I said, I'm sure the audience will find your message really inspiring. So thank you so much.
Very good. My pleasure. Thank you.